Our program continues with Harrison Starr.
You've not flown a good deal, Mr. Simon. You just are perhaps not familiar with the desert. The light is extremely lucid, clear, and flying, as we often had to do to scout, you could see incredible detail when you were 3,000 feet above it.
But she's crouching, looking down. She's not even looking up.
She's gotten out of the car. We assume you want everything spelled out. Do you want, some long literary passage to be sure that we have exactly all the detail necessary? She's gotten out of the car to get water. She's come around, and it's visible. She's obviously had despair, and he's seen her. You want more shots. That's what you're saying. Perhaps it wasn't explicit enough for you. But it's quite apparent that he could have seen her. If you want to say, is there real verisimilitude? Of course there is, because you could see her, believe me, in the desert.
Well, it would explain why he was pursuing her in any case.
And it'd be a long-haired girl, and that would be enough for him to buzz her, we would assume.
She's obviously very alone, too.
Yeah, very alone.
Just like the cop looks at her, and she's very alone.
I think these are trivia, by the way. I don't think these are the important things.
Well, you see, I admit that one item
as such...
No, wait, We let the question come in, but to correct me, but I'd like to finish.
No, go.
Okay. So the point is, he is romancing her even before he meets her, and this goes on for X minutes. And this is incredible. It's like the introduction before Othello comes on. The point is an introduction. Forgive the comparison. There's an introduction of a relationship long before there was an actual relationship, and it can only have happened in the 20th century to begin with. Because of the car-plane situation. Finally, after frightening her and shocking her and doing these incredible things with the plane inches off the road, in the course of which I understand a plane almost actually crashed into the car, it smashed off the top of the car, blew in the window and everything else, tore off the landing gear. In any case...
That's what he was using unknown, so...
He finally landed. Antonioni was in the plane, from what I understand. The plane landed. Finally, she comes, talks to him. I wish there was a better line. I think that the weakest part of the film, frankly, is the English dialogue. I expected it, but it really, I think it turned off a lot of people, including Vince Cambio, mentioning one line. I always knew it would be like this, which was cut out after the first time.
Which was meant to be cut out, and it got because there was such a rush to get the print through from. And this way, MGM was culpable. I mean, if they're to be called culpable at all, it was rushing at the end.
Right, but the point was, it was a typical line. It was the worst line in the picture.
I don't believe a word of that. I mean, Antonioni was there in the projection booth when the film was being screened at MGM, and he could have...
You don't believe a word of what? What I just said?
I don't believe that it was meant to be cut out initially. It was cut out after audiences were laughing at that line.
No, there was only one audience exposure in which they had laughed, frankly, and that was the Thursday night screening here in New York.
Right, I was there.
And he hadn't seen it, and he, as a matter of fact, hadn't caught it, and the line had been meant to be taken out 6 days before. And he'd asked for it to be out. Now, I'm not, it doesn't... I want you, you have a creep, lie, you don't believe, you have an odd vocabulary.
The point is, too, that we have
words.
to... Well,
I don't mince words.
Well,
yes, you seem to have a rather, it's very... very strong, let's say.
I think that we've all had experiences where films should have been played to audiences for some reason, like 2001 was not. Strangelove was. They cut out the custard pie scene. 2001, he cut out 19 minutes after playing it to audiences. This film, possibly some of the language, I would have even looped. Some of it was obviously looped anyway. The language was not the strong part of the film. So therefore, I would have loved a great, memorable meeting line, something very clever. It was banal. Okay, fine.
Something like was written for that astronaut.
Well, since you were already able
to... You guys...
Because I love that scene, and I wanted to walk away and remember it 10 years from now with a line.
All of you guys want immortal poetry.
Yes.
You don't want people.
Absolutely.
You don't want people.
No,
you don't believe in Diana, in Daria and Mark.
We still all remember, frankly, Scarlet, I don't give a damn, because of the fact it was a beautiful line, and lines do remember.
We remember it as a camp.
Okay,
well... We don't remember it as we remember things we hear real people saying on real buses.
I will concede to you because of the fact I happen to like the film. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm asking too much. I want immortal literature, poetry. Okay, wipe it out. But the point is, the last point on where they went with this was simply that he meets her and takes off. One of the great romantic things. They fall in love and therefore becomes a love story. You may not think it's a love story if you don't like the film. I think it's a love story. I think that's what it's about. And I think the relationship between the two, which eventually blossoms, I think the reason she sees us people in the desert are because I assume it's a hallucination from pot. I don't know. But it didn't bother me. And then when you go on from there to the house, there is once more this house fortress overlooking the whole desert, America, whatever. And when she meets these people once more, in a few swift sequences, you see these ladies around the pool who are the essence of of the sensibility that he was trying to establish, and he did. I remember one of them saying, light it yourself, talking about a cigarette, and it just captured the whole sort of selfish, inverted kind of values of these people. And at the end, when she blows the whole thing up, she blows it up because of the fact, obviously, she has been radicalized. And the last scene is not driving away into a perfect sunset. It's obviously the sunset. It's the decline of the West sort of thing, which has been done in If, and so on in other places, and it's not that new. But I think just in totality, the film emotionally was valid and true. And I step back now.
Well,
Martin.
before we open it up to a complete rebuttal, I would like to expand a bit on one important aspect which you touched on, which is terribly important in any Antonioni film, and that is the visual aspect. And Martin Last, your usual voice on this station and in art news is as an art critic. And I think it's an expertise that's especially pertinent to Antonioni's films, and especially this one, since he's often thought of as the painter among directors. How much do you sense the graphic artist's eye at work in Zabriskie Point, and how much of that response to it affected your great affection for the film?
I know that I was asked to be on this program for precisely that reason, but those feelings I have are I think, so self-evident. Even the critics didn't find it really necessary to discuss them, and I don't know really that they're terribly germane to this particular discussion. The fact that Antonioni sees in a very specific way that probably no other director has ever seen, that is, his camera sees, we all know. I don't think that he is ever, what shall I say, carried away by the way he sees things. He is perhaps in some sense a painter. Obviously canvas is not his medium, but it just doesn't seem to matter somehow. It's not a decoration on the film. It's as much a part and parcel of the film as anything is. If anything, I think perhaps the drama in Antonioni comes through something other than the head. That is to say, for Antonioni, seeing itself is drama, and I think maybe is even more important than the more superficial aspects of drama, that is to say plot, and whether or not he's using actors with a capital thespian. All of these things don't seem to me very important. It is how he sees, and I think that's where I would certainly argue with John Simon's what struck me as being rather footling quibbles about his attacks on specifics. I think what Antonioni presents us with is atmosphere, and I don't think he's terribly concerned about polarity in the sense of good, bad, establishment, radical. It's all a question of a broad way of seeing an atmosphere, and he uses visual imagery as a part of his drama. It sometimes even is his drama. The film would not be in any significant way altered, I don't think, if you took out those sort of shots of, not to be specific, as a matter of fact, I was just thinking of a shot in Blow Up, but a yellow truck passing a red brick wall. I mean, this is a very beautiful thing, and you can take it out of the film, and you haven't really changed very much about the film. But it is part of his overall eye, and his eye encompasses all of those things which we used to think of as separate things, which are painting, plot, acting, whatever.
Who acts
poetry.
in this film?
Rod Taylor.
Well,
Yeah, and
2 minutes worth,
one
which
was
is
very
always
conscious
accorded.
of the fact that he was an actor, therefore he was a false note in the film. I
But you
felt.
know, you say atmosphere, but what does this atmosphere mean? An atmosphere that doesn't mean anything has no artistic worth.
Well, why are we so?
What, could I just say something here? Do you mean to say, do you think there's any atmosphere that doesn't have meaning?
Well, I'm asking him what
No,
the
you're not- I
meaning
mean,
of
what
the
you're saying,
atmosphere
but
is.
what
He
you're-
seems to be talking about a
Is your
disembodied
question-
atmosphere, like the smog over Los Angeles, which somehow means something. I say atmosphere doesn't mean anything unless it's related to people and situations and
Oh, but
problems.
it is, because they are part of atmosphere.
Well,
But what do you, when
How?
you say mean, I
But
don't know what
atmosphere,
you want. You
first,
want-
be more precise.
I mean,
What
in
is
other wor-
atmosphere?
in other
What are we
words-
talking about? Smog is atmosphere, but I mean, what are we really talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about things concerning evocation.
That's what I think you meant, and I think what he
Well-
means is some literary significance, some kind of plot significance, something that has a much
Well,
more...
all right, what does your atmosphere evoke then? That's what all I'm asking.
Isn't it possible to see without having an intellectual response? Can't we simply dig things without being moved in
if we're
some
fools, we
Aristotelian?
can. If we're moronic, if we just want to live for our stupid little sensibilities and indulge them, yes. But if we're thinking human beings, we want to see what the idea in this thing is. What is this artwork through artistic means, through style, through form, through shape, through color, saying? And if it's not saying anything, or if it's not saying anything that hasn't been said 100 times before and better, then forget it.
It strikes me that your approach is precisely part of what Antonioni is, insofar as he attacks anything attacking. Which is excessive intellection to at the expense of being and feeling and
There's no
allowing
such thing
oneself.
as excessive intellection. What this world is dying from is lack of intellection.
You
that's
think
where you are.
you have your rhetoric is so. You remind me of Otto Preminger.
Well, I
It's a
don't know. I
very
disagree
vertical-
with
a
Otto
very
Preminger
vert-
more than I do with anyone here, so I don't quite follow you.
Well, we
Well,
touched-
you're saying that without intellect, what you're really saying is that without intellect, there's nothing. That's pretty debatable, even among people who have good intellects.
Especially.
So I think that your approach is a bit rigorous.
Look,
That's
I'm
your
not saying-
rhetoric
I'm-
is
no,
a
I'm
rigorous
not-
and
look,
somewhat
no,
literary rhetoric, and
I'm not
Martin is saying that it's literary.
Well, it is
And
literary. But if it-
Mantignoni is trying to do something else.
I
And
think-
consequently, I think that although many of your specific points may be true in themselves, that you miss the overall point.
Well, if you're saying that the film is a series of posters, a series of rather well-painted posters, which are suggestive...
Poster is the way you
Nobody
use poster is a
suggested anything of the
derogatory.
kind.
Again, you're derogatory.
But that is really what it comes down to. I mean, these short, separate scenes which are not developed, which are not probing, which are not really speculative in any way, they just show commonplaces, they just show the typical this or the typical that, and are left unconnected, sort of floating around in limbo, just as those debris from the explosion are later floating around in the blue emulsion. And if this is supposed to be somehow suggestive and meaningful and profound, I'll be damned, because I don't see any of that. I think a film like Easy Rider, which I also don't have great admiration for, does infinitely more in this genre and in this mode than the Antonioni film does.
Well, it certainly involves you more deeply emotionally. There's no more intellectualization, certainly, in Easy Rider, but you are
Right.
at least emotionally identifying with these people, which you aren't, which brings us back to one point that we've touched on before. Why non-actors? Unlike many other Italian directors, Antonioni has previously featured established performers. He's even used American ones. He used Steve Cochran in El Grido, which was his first important film. And since he needed very young people here and wanted unknowns, obviously, he didn't want any previous identification so that he could start tabula rasa, I suppose. But he could still avoid casting Tuesday Weld and Peter Fonda, and have used skilled players from television or off-Broadway or even acting schools. Why go out after people who are... I've never seen a film which was such a terrific example of casting against it.
I can't answer that. I'm not Michelangelo. I mean, I can tell you what happened, a recounting of events, but I can't tell you why ultimately, in his own private way, he chose Daria and Mark. There's some things that we went by that I'd like to go back and discuss, and one of them is the photography. But that's, we can perhaps defer that.
I only wanted to say, Harrison, that insofar as I'm concerned, I'm not a film critic. I don't even think much about film. I just
See it.
do it,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it works. I was not at any given moment bothered, as were all the hubris-filled critics that I read, by the performances of Daria and Mark. I'm not interested in acting, and I didn't find it distressing that perhaps at times there seemed awkwardnesses. As we sit at this table, I see them in you, I see them in Joe, I feel them in
See
myself.
them in John and by John.
No, somehow...
Is it granite? Is it
no.
rock?
Look, I mean,
And
why don't you look at paintings? You're not interested in film, you're not interested in performances, you're not interested in acting. I mean, you're not
Let's
interested
say
in
I'm
any of these
not
things.
hung up in.
Well, why not- why not stick to
I think
painting
there's
in
a
that
point. No, I think there's a point that he was trying to make, and that it was made about a film which can be brought up in this context only with a certain reluctance because Michelangelo didn't like it. But 2001 is in a way, a non-intellectual, non-ideational film. Although there's idea behind it, the question is what the value of those ideas is another matter.
It's certainly a non-performance
But
film.
it's a non-performance film. The figures are meant to be plasticized. They're meant to be roboticized. And it's a film which is primarily, as they like to say, in contemporary vernacular, a trip, a visual trip. And I would like to say and emphasize this very much strongly, that that's in a way what this picture is. It may not be as subtle and as redolent of a milieu, of a world as La Ventura, which I agree with, I think is a masterpiece. But I do also agree with Joe that visually, that in a way these things will be remembered. They'll be emblematic. We could debate for hours and use perhaps something even closer. Rather than painting, you could use poetry, symbolist poetry, or imagist poetry, and say, look, let's talk about these things. You've chosen something here. What does it mean? How does it relate? I mean, your rhetoric is that of a new critic.
But don't you see?
You know, it's not the rhetoric. It isn't that you can't use it, obviously. No one can prevent you, but it won't be why people will remember this picture.
But you see, there's something very dangerous about throwing in terms like imagist poetry. I mean, the whole point in an imagist poem is that it's about 8 lines long. And those 8 lines sort of spread out across the page and across your mind as you read it. But a film like this is not 8 lines, it is an hour and 3/4. And entirely different things are expected and demanded from it as a result. It makes different demands on us, and therefore we make different demands on it. From those that we make on an imagist poem. So, I mean, this kind of jumping across the art frontiers is very dangerous, and I think serves very little purpose.
The art frontiers, this presupposes a rigid structure and a rigid set of canons for every art, which of course is absurd
No,
because
they're not
art
rigid. They're
because
deduced
art
from
eventually
psychological realities.
No, it's deduced, and the deduction becomes an intellectual process, which is the problem here, because the deduction, when you have to put it into words and make a rhetoric about it, right away becomes an obstacle rather than an aid,
Look, if
John.
putting things
And
into
the fact
words is dangerous, then why are you a critic? A
The
critic is
point-
putting things into words.
Because
If you
it's the
mistrust
best-
putting things into words, you should get out of this train.
No, John, because it's the best compromise, the best approach, the best attack we can make to try to deal in terms that everybody can share for an experience. And that's the problem, that it's basically art is an experience of some sort, whether it's a personal or universal experience, whatever it happens to be. Art is an experience, and the words are merely a poor second best
That may
trying.
be true of
You
your
said it
words,
yourself.
Joe. I don't think it's true of
But
my
you've
words.
said
Well, then
this
that's
yourself.
because
Wait
you've got
just
a series of
moment.
categories.
You said this in the preface
what?
to a recent book of yours.
What?
That words in describing a film, which is after all an experience, were only an approximation, only an
Right.
attempt.
Right, it's an
Yes,
approximation.
I mean,
but
but
I
I
just
think
said that, and you
that's what he's
attacked me for
saying.
saying
Yeah,
that. How do you
but-
explain that,
I mean,
John?
I can- you
But if they're well used, they're an
Well, you-
art in themselves, and they can.
well,
and
then
they
we get the
can
critic as
convey- and
performer.
They can convey something very important.
The critic becomes the
Certainly,
performer
criticism
then,
is an
right?
art. If it isn't an art, it's not worth.
Fine. Well, as long as the art doesn't
Well,
interfere with the art we're observing,
No,
that's
of course
fine.
not.
As long as it's a parallel art and it doesn't get in the way. But it seems to me that
But-
the critic's art is to, in some way, connect with the art that is on the screen
Oh,
or on the
absolutely,
canvas.
absolutely.
And if we can't, then we mustn't therefore feel threatened and say it doesn't fit, it won't compute. I don't know what to do with it, therefore it must be invalid. It seems to me the most receptive thing to do is to get out of the way, to step back a little bit and say, it's a non-verbal experience, can't deal with it. Next. And then you'll get another film that will be a verbal experience and which will bore the hell out of you.
No. I mean, one can deal verbally with any film. I mean, with some films, one can be more rhapsodic than with others, but to deal with words is always possible. I mean, you may not get the exactly same results, but it is a terrible thing when critics begin to apologize for using words and for being reduced to this inferior second-rate medium with which to do justice to the magnificent first-rate medium that they're dealing with. I think words are capable of of almost anything if they're well used. I admit that most people write the kind of criticism which isn't even words. It's garbage, and it is not fit to deal with livestock shows in Indiana. However, to get back to the matter at hand, and I would like to address myself some of the points you made, Joe. I mean, it was amazing to me how you managed to bring in things like the Master Builder and Othello, and then you complained that there wasn't a good enough line for these kids to meet, since you're so willing to graft the greatest works of existing art upon this aborted film. I'm surprised that you couldn't supply some words from Romeo and Juliet that you could transpose and project onto the film, and thereby save that pathetic little scene.
Why don't you deal with the film?
Wait,
instead
there's a
of with
point
the,
I'd like to make.
No, but
You
I have to deal with what you said.
No,
I mean,
no, you're
there's no
surprised.
similarity whatsoever between Rod Taylor and the Master Builder. I mean, to make any comparison between the cipher, this non-entity who is not given any depth of character. You speak about the change in the girl. How can a non-entity change? The image of all of these characters, the girl, the boy, the man, is so fleeting, so evanescent, so transparent.
It sounds like a description of a human being.
I mean, there's nothing. No, it isn't. I can't see the wall behind you, but you can always see the wall behind and in front of these people more than you can see them. And the point is that then, how can you say this girl changes? What does she do at the end of the film that she hasn't done before? She does nothing at any time. She just drifts around like a blob, and she continues to be a blob at the end of the film. She has one vision of a house exploding. This makes her changed character.
She rejects what was before a possible alternative to what he was doing. She rejects in Blow Up. What he did was he had the kid drop out. The photographer decided there was no point in attempting to distinguish between reality and non-reality, and he just joined the mimes and heard them playing tennis when they weren't playing tennis. In this case, she made the other decision. She came back into saying, I can't accept the world as it is. I've got to blow it up.
But you said that the sunset is yet another, you said the sunset is yet another vision of the end of the world or something, of the end of civilization. But she drives into that sunset. I mean, if she's driving into this disaster, then how is she making any kind of a significant change? She just becomes part of the general scene. I mean, you're sort of throwing symbols around as if they had no value at all.
It's not worth arguing about, but the fact that it's there.
Whether the sunset whether she drives into it and has any significance or not isn't the point. The point is what happens to the girl. The other thing is...
Nothing happens to the girl. The girl is the same cipher at the end of the film that she was at the beginning, and the middle, and at any in-between point.
Well, that's because you want a film in which there's character. You want a film in which character is terribly important.
Well, only character can change. Something that is not character cannot change. A shadow, may in fact change from longer to shorter, but it's not a significant change. Whereas a person can change.
No, what you want is a drama of character, and not just character in the sense that two-dimensional ciphers, as often is the case in certain kinds of musical drama or supposedly non-serious drama. So what you're saying is that your terms are disappointed. It's your demands that are disappointed. Perhaps for Michelangelo, it wasn't terribly important that there be a lot.
Well, if you tell me what was important, and if you can make this stick, I'll be willing to buy that.
Well, I would say that it's difficult again for me because I'm not Michelangelo. But what was important for him was to make a film that dealt in terms that were not 19th century, that were not based on the great tradition, that were as much as possible understandable by people who've rejected it, and rejected it and attempted to replace it with a different way of knowing. And so I think that's why there's so little character, that the dialogue in a sense is practically irrelevant, but you don't see a great deal of Rodney, but you see enough to know what kind of a man he is. He's obviously a powerful figure. He's two-dimensional. I would say
yes. But that's the technique of the comic strip, where you get a sort of cartoon image which is supposed to produce all kinds of stock responses: rich, successful, good-looking, smart.
You don't have to produce it.
This is not art. This is a kind of
It's not art according to you.
shorthand.
No, it isn't. What you don't understand is that perhaps we're at a point where the shorthand is more relevant than anything else. I would assume that...
Yes,
I mean, it's all been done, don't you?
In secretarial school,
are we
I
going
grant
to
you
find...
shorthand is the most important thing, but in art we expect something a little more
You
than
have
that.
a way of debauching a metaphor, which absolutely astonishes me.
I think you mean debauching, don't you?
I said debauching.
Well,
I'm from San Francisco.
I
Perhaps
see.
my pronunciation is as good as yours.
I think actually
you have an
either
odd,
word applies
you have an
in the
odd
case.
accent.
Anyway.
The point is that for you, characterization, complex, three-dimensional characterization is important. Perhaps for Michelangelo, and perhaps for a different kind of art, it's not important. You talk about painting. Well, let's refer to painting. You want painting with the figures in it?
I didn't say that, and I don't propose to make this a discussion of painting, which it is not. We have enough trouble discussing what we are
It
discussing.
still seems as if you want to deal with our time today in 19th century terms, in 19th century tradition.
Well, you see, I don't know.
This
what to mean
has
by
been
19th
Sound
century.
on Film, a series of broadcasts on films and the people who make them. This program, Zabriskie, What's the Point? A discussion of Michelangelo Antonioni's new MGM film with critics Al Lees, John Simon, Joseph Gelmis, Martin Last, and the executive producer of Zabriskie Point, Harrison Starr. This program originated at WBAI-FM, the listener-sponsored station in New York City, and was distributed by Irwin Frankel Productions. Soundtrack music performed by the Pink Floyd.